It's not uncommon for things to get a little worse initially. You would think, oh my God, it's already bad enough, and now that we're going to work on some things, it's going to get worse. Don't be surprised. In fact, I might be so bold as to say it would be likely, because she has kind of learned how to deal with you guys. I'm not saying it was functional, but she certainly has learned how to deal with you, and you have learned to deal with her. I'm not saying it was necessarily a healthy way to deal with her, but you have established some kind of a habit, probably a very dysfunctional habit. And now you're going to shift gears. So that's really going to upset the apple cart. If you've been used to driving around in your car on 3 wheels, and 1 wheel is just driving on the brake drum, you have learned how to adjust that car and kind of get by. And now you're going to put the wheel back on it again. It's going to take a little while before you realize, okay, well, now I got to go back to driving, normal like type thing. So I hope that made some sense. Anyway, don't be discouraged if you have setbacks. In fact, I would go so far as to say, when you have these setbacks, and you said you've had a few that really almost, was quite a bump in the road, those are perfect opportunities to practice. You can't come to group and go, okay, well, we have these recommendations, so now we're going to try this and it's going to go perfectly. Of course, that's not going to happen. You know that. But what you may not be thinking of is, okay, well, when we do hit a real nasty bump, instead of going, oh, and beating up on ourselves, I thought we had this down, we were doing so much better for so long, we feel like we're back to square one. Instead of all that shit, you're going to stop, hey, okay, great. We're still practicing. This is a great opportunity to use this as a learning opportunity. If you wanted to learn how to golf and you never golfed before, and then you went out to the golf course and you were terrible at it, but you kept practicing, and then you got really good, and you thought, I think I have this thing down. And then one day, you thinking you've got it all down, go and have a terrible game, balls all over the place. You're like, I feel like I'm starting over again. So you have some bad times, and you learn from those opportunities. They're not setbacks, they're setups for a practice. I had a conversation with somebody, and you guys that were here will remember, she said that she's not in love with me anymore, but she still loves me. I'm not recommending anything, but I am saying that if that happened to me, I would have a problem with it, but I wouldn't try to change her mind about it. I would have a problem with it, and what I would do with my problem, and would take ownership of that problem, I would move on. Because I would be the type of person that would want to be in love with somebody and would want that somebody to be in love with me. Falling in love and falling out of love is not a choice or a decision. It just happens organically. It's like falling asleep. You don't lay down and think, okay, well, I'm going to make the decision to fall asleep right now. No, it sneaks up on you and sleep takes over when you're not even consciously aware of it. So I can't blame any NTYs who fall out of love. I can't blame them. There's no way to control that. If falling out of love is not a big deal to you, in other words, you're perfectly okay with just being a roommate or just cohabitating or have kind of like a brother-sister relationship, then I guess it doesn't matter whether she's in love with you or not. That's not me. Now, on a related note, and I'm not accusing of any NTYs in here doing this, so those that might be watching, don't take this personally. But in many cases, statements coming from NT wives are nothing short of emotional abuse, but he, due to mind blindness issues, alexithymia issues, executive function issues, and a few other things, doesn't even know that he's being abused. I've lost track of the number of men that I've worked with that have described abuse from her, but he didn't even call it abuse. He didn't even know that it would be qualified as legitimate abuse. But if he's being honest with me, which I'm sure he is. That's his truth. I don't think he's making things up just to get sympathy. Some men describe behavior from their NT wife that is nothing short of emotional abuse. And she accuses you of being emotionally abusive. A lot of NT wives complain that you don't have any empathy and have complained bitterly about your supposed lack of emotional reciprocity, but have had no empathy for you either. So I just want to make it very clear that this is a two-way street more than some ENTs are willing to admit. If I have some executive function deficits, I'm not going to totally understand her sarcasm. I'm not going to be able to be a good reader of her facial cues, her body language, her tone of voice, her volume of voice, and so on. So if I have an abstract thinking deficit, I'm not going to understand language unless it's very literal and concrete. With abstract thinking deficit, I'm going to take things very literally. I'm not going to, if she is even remotely vague in describing what she wants, it's going to be hard for me to understand. If I have an emotional control deficit, which is another, emotional control is an executive function, but if I have a deficit in that area, I'm going to have difficulty controlling my escalating emotions. We call that emotional dysregulation. So if I tend to revert to some form of a shutdown or a meltdown, that is an emotional control deficit. Planning and organizing is an executive function. If we have a deficit in that area, then I have difficulty organizing my time, organizing information, carrying out instructions. How does that cause a problem in the relationship? The ASD individual is usually a visual learner in a verbal world. So if she is giving me verbal instructions, I'm really going to have a hard time understanding and carrying out those instructions accurately. Shifting focus, if I have a deficit in that area, it's going to be hard for me to stop what I'm doing, especially if it's one of my special interests and I'm highly focused on it in the moment, to drop that and shift completely to attend to something that she wants me to attend to. Even if she just interrupts what I'm doing and wants to engage in a conversation all of a sudden, especially if, I need to talk to you about this problem. It's like, okay, well, thanks for the big surprise and disrupting my routine type of thing. And then the other deficit that is very prominent in ASD is working memory. So if I have a working memory deficit, it's hard for me to remember what she said, especially if it was too many points that droned on for 15 or 20 minutes. So how this is going to cause a problem in the relationship is when she is upset with me, but she doesn't come right out and tell me, she expects me to know it anyway. But if I don't get it, if I don't understand that she's upset because she's not being direct and concrete with me and being very specific, then somehow I'm insensitive, uncaring because I'm not noticing that she's upset. If you are operating like you usually operate in the heat of the moment, you are already by default operating under the old brain. So I have used the term many times. We'll use meltdowns as the example. You can't think in terms of intervention with a meltdown, which, by the way, is the amygdala on steroids. We have to think in terms of prevention. Now, I understand that sometimes things have to be dealt with right now, and in those cases, you're just simply going to have to tough it out as best you can. The other 98% of the time, when you are feeling heat, we said heat of the moment. It's no longer just a moment. There's now heat. When you're feeling heat in the moment, you are under the old brain by default. And it would be best to think in terms of prevention, because there's no way for me to intervene in this moment. If I'm experiencing the heat of the moment, I'm not going to be able to instantly move myself from old brain to new brain. Not going to happen. So I have to think in terms of prevention, which is, let's use an example with the wife. I'm going to have this conversation. She's upset about something. She sent me a text. We're going to have the discussion tonight. I know for a fact that I'm going to probably go into this operating mostly under the old brain, and I'm going to have to let her know when that happens. And I'm going to say, I do want to discuss this, but right now I can already tell that I'm not in a mental state to discuss this in a way that's going to yield any kind of problem solving. Mental state being I'm not in my prefrontal cortex right now. This is a stretch, and some NTs aren't up for this. Can we treat this a little bit like a business meeting where perhaps you write down some of your thoughts and let me look at those, and then I will write down some of my responses to those. And this does make longer work, but it also gets you removed from the old brain, because now she is talking to you on a piece of paper instead of face to face, where her words are hitting you in the forehead like darts, and she's staring at you, and that look is going right through your eyes and drilling 2 holes in the back of your head. So this is a longer route to problem solve, but with the other way, you don't problem solve. We're removing the heat. We're even removing the moment. This is important to you, therefore it's important to me. I want to get the full message. Could you please write down the main points and let me, when you're done, give it to me. I will go over here and look at it and ruminate through them and come back with a response. Give me some time to ruminate over this. And while you're over there dealing with that, now your prefrontal cortex is in charge. And I understand some things are emergent. You wouldn't be able to do this some of the time, but the times that you would not be able to do this would be just 2-3% of the time. Some things are emergent, and she's not going to write it out. And some ENT wives say, I'm not writing anything out. You stand there and take it like a man, in which case I would say, leave. Unless you're a masochist and want to just sit there and take it to prove something to yourself. You're not going to get anything accomplished. Why punish yourself? That's not self-soothing. We just discussed in this session today. We're looking for self-soothing. We're shooting for the parasympathetic mode. If she said, no, I want you to sit there and sweat. I don't think so. I don't think so. See you later. Bye. Write it out. Your main points. We will talk. If you expect me to sit here and try to problem solve when my amygdala has flooded me with cortisol and adrenaline, no. Instead of punishing myself by this conversation, I'm going to self-soothe myself by removing myself from this conversation. And there is something to be said that sometimes she just has to have an emotional vomit to feel better. But I got a real problem with that, because that's like me asking you, okay, sometimes she's going to be verbally abusive, and you just kind of, just go ahead and be tied to the whipping post for a little while, because she'll feel better. Fuck that. We're interested in being able to stay in parasympathetic mode so that our new brain is working, so that we are rational and logical, so that we can problem solve, which will benefit her. We care about solving the relationship problems, but it ain't going to happen unless we do it this way. So if she's more concerned with just having an emotional vomit in your lap than problem solving, you have a choice. Okay, I think she probably needs to vent. I'm going to be over here in a heightened state of anxiety, and I have no clue what to do about it, but I'll just go ahead and let her spit all over me. Or I'm going to start treating myself better. I will problem solve when you calm down, And we may have to make a few accommodations, but my big goal is to solve the problem. Instead of letting the problem linger and linger and linger, and your resentment getting deeper and deeper and deeper, which is what we've been doing for the previous 10, 15 years. Now she has a choice. She can choose to be a bully and get nothing accomplished other than you doing a shutdown or a meltdown. Or she can go, okay, well, I'm up for trying anything to solve some of the problems because they're piling up over there in the closet and we're running out of closet space. Let's say that she talked you into going to some kind of a family event, some kind of a cookout or whatever, a reunion or whatever, and you went and you kind of got burned out with the idle chit-chat pretty quickly, and you kind of went off over there away from the crowd and got on your phone and kind of entertained yourself. Just made that up. Okay? So now, on the way home, she's going to engage in this false assumption stuff again. Well, I don't know why you can't participate. I don't know why we were over there and we were talking and you just left and whatever. You can imagine what you're going to receive, right? So what would be going on in the case where he just was bored to death with chit-chat and it was no fun to him and he went over there and entertained himself? We would want to think, okay, was that a mind blindness thing, an emotions blindness thing, an executive function thing, or an anxiety thing? We could call it an anxiety thing. And this is a hell of a paradox. You wouldn't think that things that are boring raise your anxiety. I'm talking about specifically people on the autism spectrum. You wouldn't necessarily equate boring with anxiety. There is a direct link between something that's exceedingly boring and your anxiety. You like to engage in your special interests, and you can be hyper-focused on that special interest for extended periods of time because it keeps your mind going. It is actually a reward for your brain because we're focused on this and my wheels are turning. When you don't have something that's fairly exciting to you, you get bored, and boredom is painful to people on the autism spectrum. That's not an exaggeration. I'll repeat it. Boredom is exceedingly painful to people on the autism spectrum. So we'll use that. So I'm going to plug it into the 5 things here. Number 1, if you can see the notes, it's let her know the trait that I have. So I'm going to say, well, as you may know, hopefully I have anxiety, and I was honestly kind of bored with the chit-chat, and it was kind of raising my anxiety, and so I went over there to distract myself because I didn't want to be inappropriate in the group. That's step 1. Step 2 is how she's downloading it. I know that may have downloaded to you as I was trying to be antisocial, or that I didn't care about what people were saying, or that I wanted to go home early, perhaps. Maybe that's how you were downloading it. Step 3, what's really going on? What's really going on is boredom, believe it or not, is really a source of stress for me. Number 4, but I still love you and care about you and want to meet your needs. Number 5, so it would be helpful to me if in the future we could not linger at these gatherings for 3 hours. I'm willing to tough it out for an hour. I'm not going to be much good after that 60-minute mark. So in this way, you're letting her know what's really going on so that she doesn't make the false assumption, and you're offering a solution. You're not saying, well, but it would be helpful to me if you never ever asked me to go anywhere again. That's not what we're shooting for. It would be helpful to me if we went there and I knew that there was going to be a time limit, because in times past when we go somewhere, sometimes it's 2 hours, sometimes it's 4 hours, and I don't know how. So it'd be helpful to me if I knew we're going to arrive at such and such a time and we're going to be leaving at such and such a time, in which case I can tough it out at that point.